Hello children, today we are going to do the rat trap. Actually we had started rat trap in a previous video which is part 1 of rat trap, in which I had given the introduction to the story, summary, theme, central idea, everything. The characters had been introduced in the first part, and the about the author we have discussed, the style and setting. Almost the introduction part was over in first part of video. Today I am here with the second part of the video, The Rat Trap by Selma Lagerlof. Here I have tried to bring some important events of the story with word meaning. How the story proceeds. This I have tried to bring here in the second part. And third part, I will end the video. In third part, we will complete the chapter. That will be the end of the video. Let's start our story. Peddler's means of survival and his physical appearance. Here we will discuss how did Peddler survive, what did he do for his livelihood, and how did he look. The peddler was a man who went on selling small rat traps of wire. So what is rat trap, children? Have you seen? Yes. Rat trap means the traps for catching rats. Actually, the author has tried to show rat trap is a metaphor of life, for life, that we all are rats and this world is a rat trap. And the way we put baits to catch the rat, similarly, all these riches, joys, materialistic things, money, power, position, all these are the baits for us. That is why we are called this world is called a rat trap, because the moment we try to catch the bait, the world comes to an end. So the peddler was a man who went on selling small rat traps of wire. He made them himself at odd moments. Odd moments means in his free time. From the material he got by begging in stores or at the big farms. But even so, as the business was not specially profitable, so he had to resort to both begging and petty thievery to keep body and soul together. What is keeping body and soul together? That is survive, especially in a difficult circumstance. Even so, his clothes were in rags, his cheeks were sunken, and hunger gleamed in his eyes. Cheeks were sunken means cheeks were hollow because of hunger. Actually, the gleam means shine. Hunger gleamed in his eyes means his eyes looked very hungry. The metaphor of rat trap, which highlights the human predicament, how the life is a rat trap. One day, this man had fallen into a line of thoughts, which really seemed him entertaining. He had naturally been thinking of his rat trap when suddenly he was struck by the idea that its lands, its seas, its cities and villages was nothing but a big rat trap. It had never existed for any other purpose than to set baits for people. Line of thought means started thinking about something. We also come sometimes in the line of thoughts continuously we start thinking. Set baits for people means offering temptation, making person greedy. The comforts of life which is offered to trap someone. It offered riches and joys, shelter and food, heat and clothing, exactly as the rat trap offered cheese and hope. And as soon as anyone let himself be tempted to touch the bait, it closed in on him, and then everything came to an end. Tempting means convinced, want to take, greed. Peddler amused with his own ideas. Peddler was amused with his own idea. Thinking world as a rat trap, Peddler was very happy. So why Peddler was happy? because the world had, of course, never been very kind to him. Wherever he went, ordinarily met with sour faces. So it gave him unusual joy to think ill of it in this way. It became a cherished pastime of his. Cherished means to love, protect. He loved to think that he was not only the greedy one who is running after money, but all are greedy. Every human being is greedy. So he enjoyed thinking this way during his many dreary plodding. Dreary means very dull, and plodding is to walk with heavy steps. So during his many dreary plodding to think of people he knew who had let themselves be caught in the dangerous snare and of others who were still circling around the bait. Snare means trap. That how people were caught in the dangerous trap. Hospitality shown by the crofter. So, thinking all this, one day, this peddler came across a cottage where where he had gone to ask something, maybe shelter or food. But the owner of the house, who was an old man, an old crofter, was very generous. He was very hospitable. So he shows a warm hospitality to the beggar, to that peddler. The crofter was an old man without wife or child. So he welcomed his guest. One dark evening, as he was trudging along the road, who is he? The peddler. Trudging means walking slowly with heavy steps. Trudging along the road, he caught sight of a little grey cottage by the roadside, and he knocked on the door to ask shelter for the night. To his amazement, he was not refused. Usually he met with sour faces. Nobody respected him. But this time the owner of the house was very happy. The owner, who was an old man without wife or child, was happy to get someone to talk to in his loneliness. So children, you know that when we share our joys, it multiplies. When we share our sorrows, it divides. So man, being a social animal, needs someone for his company. He cannot live alone. So, as the peddler, so as the crofter, he wanted someone in his loneliness. So he was very happy to see his guest. Immediately, he put the porridge pot on the fire and gave him supper. Then he carved off such a big slice from his tobacco roll that was enough for both the stranger's pipe and his own. And he also shared his tobacco, gave him tobacco. And finally he got out an old pack of cards and played Majolus until the bedtime. Majolus is a game played with cards in Sweden. So altogether the host was very warm and very hospitable. And not only he was generous in giving him food and playing cards with him, he was also very generous to share his secrets with the peddler. The crofter was such a fine gentleman. The crofter was such a simple gentleman that he also shared the secrets of his money. The old man was quite generous. Generous means very liberal, very big-hearted. In sharing his secrets, the guest was informed that in his days of prosperity, prosperity means riches, when he was rich, his host had been a crofter. Host had been a crofter, a person who works on a rented farm. So he was a farmer. He worked on a rented farm. But now he was no longer young, so he could not work on farm. Now his host had been a crofter at Iron Works, and had worked on the land. Now that he had no longer able to do labor, it was his cow which supported him. So now he had cow. In Sweden, we tell the cows are called boss. So that bossy was extraordinary. His bossy in Latin, the word boss used for a cow. So his cow was extraordinary. who could give milk for the creamery. Creamery is what you call your dairy, a factory that produces cheese and cream. So that he could give milk. She could give milk for the creamery, and after selling the milk, the last month only he had received all of 30 kroner. Kroner is what? It's currency. Sweden, currency of Sweden, kroner. Many European countries have a kroner as a currency, um, a kroner in payment. The peddler must have seemed incredulous. Incredulous means peddler would not believe that the old man must be having 30 kroner. So he seemed incredulous, unbelievable. So the crofter took down a leather pouch which was hung on a nail in the very window frame and picked out three wrinkled 10 kroner bills and held up before the eyes of his guest, showed him the money. And that money, what was for the peddler? That money which was shown was a bait for the peddler. He was he became greedy to get that money. So Crofter's confidence was broken by the peddler. Was the peddler able to keep Crofter's confidence? No. The crofter had been so good to him, the crofter had been so nice to him, but the peddler, he took his money, he stole his money and ran away. Next day, both men got up in good season. The crofter was in a hurry to milk his cow, and the other man probably thought he should not stay in bed when the head of the house had gotten up. They left the cottage at the same time. The crofter locked the door and put the key in his pocket. The man with the rat trap said goodbye and thank you. And thereupon each went his own way. They got up in a good season, means they got up early, very happily, because they had a wonderful night. And because Crofter was going to milk his cow, so Peddler also, he left his house. And they both went their own way. Half an hour later, the rat trap peddler stood again before the door. He did not try to get in. However, he only went up to the window, smashed a pane, smashed means badly broken, struck his hand and got hold of the pouch with the 30 kroner. He took the money and thrust it into his own pockets. He kept it hidingly into his pocket. Then he hung the leather pouch very carefully back in its place and went away. See, how did he return? How did the peddler return? The kindness of the crofter. The crofter had done so much for him and he stole his money. This way, Crofter's confidence was broken by the peddler. The peddler thought that he had indeed fallen into a trap. So after stealing the money, the peddler did not take the public highway because he was a thief now. He had fallen into the trap. So instead of taking the public highway, he entered into a forest which was very big, dense forest. As he walked along with the money in his pocket, he felt quite pleased with his smartness. At first, he dared not continue on the public highway, so turned off the road into the woods. During the first hours, this caused no difficulty. Later in the day, it became worse. So initially in the forest, he was walking and walking without any problem, much difficulty. But gradually when the evening started descending means coming down, it was evening, it was winter, he started finding problem because he could not find any way to come out. Ultimately, he saw that he was moving on the same path. Later in the day, it became worse, for it was a big and confusing forest. He tried to be sure to walk in a definite direction, but the paths twisted back and forth strangely without coming to an end. Finally, he realized that he had only been walking around the same parts of the forest. So, no way out, moving in the same forest for the whole day. And then all at once he recalled his thoughts about the world and the rat trap. Now he realized that he had fallen into the rat trap. His own turn had come. He had let himself be fooled by a bait and had been caught in the and had been caught. The whole forest with its trunks and branches, its thickets. What is thickets? A dense group of bushes and fallen logs closed in upon him like an impenetrable prison, jail from which one cannot come out, from which one cannot pass. Impenetrable means impassable. Prison from which he could never escape. Now his own turn had come and he had been befooled. Peddler's condition in the forest. The peddler's condition was worst in the forest. It was winter, so the darkness was already descending. Descending means coming down over the forest. It increased danger, his gloom and despair. Gloom means darkness. Despair means hopelessness. So gradually with the passage of time, he was becoming more and more hopeless. Finally, he saw no way out and he sank down on the ground. Sank means sat down on the ground. Not sit actually, fell down on the ground. Tired to death. He was deadly tired. Thinking that his last moment had come. Just as he laid his head on the ground, he heard a sound. A hard, regular thumping sound. Thumping is the sound of something heavy object beating like this. So this is the thumping sound. Those were the hammered strokes from an iron mill. There must be some people nearby, he thought. And that was a hope in the forest, in the midst of the danger. There was a hope that there must be some people nearby. And he thought and summoned all his strength. Summoned means gathered, collected all his strength, got up and staggered in the direction of the sound. Staggered means to walk with difficulty because he was deadly tired. So somehow he managed to get up and walk in the direction of the sound, descending to decrease. Here it has come in the last. Now hope in the midst of despair, and then he staggered towards the iron mill. That time there was Ramso iron mill, and he moved that side for shelter, for begging the shelter for night. The sound was coming from the Ramso Iron Works, which was a large plant with smelter, rolling mill and forge. Or these are the machines of iron mill. Smelter means the machine in which metal is melted to form into shape. Rolling mill means machine to roll metals into sheets. And forge is also a shop where metal is heated. Means आप कह सकते हो भट्टी, लोहार की दुकान. You must have seen on roads how they work with huge fire on the anvil. In winter, the roads near the mill were black from the coal dust. There were many noises inside. And outside the forge. There were many noises inside and outside the forge. Inside, there was noise of what? Noise of all the machines working. And the charcoal burning. And outside, there was noise of heavy rain on the tiled roofs, heavy wind. So, the blacksmith did not notice that a man had opened the gate and entered the forge until he stood close up to the furnace. And the man entered the gate and came and stood near the furnace. Furnace is fire, chula, bhatti. The blacksmith glanced casually and indifferently at the intruder. Indifferently means uncaring. Intruder is a person who comes without being called, a trespasser. So obviously, for blacksmith, getting such kind of guests, poor and vagabonds, was not a very new thing. Every day some or the other beggar or any poor people would come for night shelter. So he did not take care He looked at him very uncaringly at the intruder and gave him a haughty consent to stay for the night. Haughty means very arrogantly. He did not utter a word very arrogantly. He simply agreed, gave permission to stay for the night. Means he simply nodded his head and okay, he could sleep. The poor beggar did not want any respect. He did not expect also any respect. He wanted shelter for the night and tomorrow he will leave the iron mill slowly. And he had got the opportunity to live. But the owner of the iron mill, the iron master, was very smart. He wanted to be the best and the mill owner. So every day he used to have 2 rounds of the mill. The ironmaster's nightly rounds in the forge. It was night, and the Ramso iron mill was owned by a very prominent ironmaster. He watched both night and day to see that the work was done properly. On one of his nightly rounds of inspection, the first thing he saw was a tall ragamuffin. Ragamuffin is the poor man. Prominent ironmaster means famous ironmaster. Ragamuffin is a person in rags. The poor vagabond was sleeping. The blacksmith did not take care, but the owner of the mill, he had to see who was sleeping in his factory. So, at first thing he saw was the tall ragamuffin who had eased his way close to the furnace. He walked close up to him, looked him over very carefully, and then tore off his slouch hat to get a better view of his face. And tore off means to remove. He removed the hat from his face to get better view of his face because he wanted to find out who the man was sleeping in his forge. And the moment slouch hat means a hat with a wide flexible brim or edge. So he removed to see. And surprisingly, when the ironmaster saw the vagabond, he mistook him for one of his old friends. In that light, which was not very bright, he thought it was his old friend. Ironmaster mistakes of considering the peddler his old acquaintance. Ironmaster thought that it was his friend who had come to take shelter. Ironmaster also worked in an army, and he thought that it was his friend Niels Olof who was also an army man. Taking off the peddler's hat, he mistook him as an old acquaintance, Niels Olof. The peddler did not know him, nor he had seen this man earlier. The ironmaster mistook him for his friend, but actually the peddler had never seen ironmaster before. But he thought that if this man mistook him as his old companion and gave him some money out of pity, then it would be a good thing. Again, that was a trap. Again, the peddler was not telling the truth. When ironmaster mistook him of Niels Olof, his old regimental comrade, old friend, he did not disclose his identity. Why? Because he thought that if the ironmaster will pity him, will feel kindness for him and gives him some money out of pity, it would be a good idea. So acquaintance means associate, known, companion is friend, and the vagabond thought that feeling shame, disappointment, kindness, if the ironmaster will give him some money, it will be a very good thing. Therefore, he did not undeceive him. Deceive means to cheat, and undeceive means to free from misconception. So he did not try to remove his misconception. Therefore, he did not undeceive him by opening the identity. The ironmaster talked to him very politely and invited him home. The ironmaster thought that it was his friend with whom the things have gone very bad. He had reached such a bad state. So he talked to him very politely and asked him about his past and invites him for Christmas to his home. But the peddler declines the ironmaster invitation. He did not accept the invitation to go along up to the manor house and be received by the owner like an old regimental comrade. Regimental comrade means army friend, a fellow soldier. That, however, did not please the tramp, the beggar, the peddler, the rat trap seller, whatever you call the tramp. He was not happy with the idea of going to manor house. Manor house is a big house in the countryside. So he was not happy with it. Why he was not happy? Because he knew maybe the ironmaster could not recognize him at night, but he will definitely recognize him in broad daylight. So he was not pleased with the idea of going. No, I couldn't think of it, he said, looking quite alarmed. Alarmed means frightened. He was looking frightened also because he was also a thief. He thought of the 30 kroner. To go up to the manor house would be like throwing himself voluntarily into the lion's den. The ironmaster assumed, and so he thought that if he will go to ironmaster's house, it will be like throwing himself into the lion's den. Abel mujhe maar. Putting his leg on the sharp edge, inviting the problem. So he refused. The ironmaster assumed that he felt embarrassed because of his miserable clothing. But ironmaster thought that he was not ready to go because he was in rags. His clothes were in pathetic state. So he said, "Please don't think that I have such a fine home that you cannot show yourself there. We don't have any company for Christmas. Now come along with me and help us make the Christmas food disappear a little faster." So I told the children the common theme in the story revolves around company. Everyone wants to share their joy with others. And same way Ironmaster thought that if his friend goes to his home, they will enjoy the Christmas together. So he insisted. So he requested him a lot to come with him. But the peddler said no and no and no. He flatly. So today in part 2, we will do only till here. Next video, I'll come with part 3, where we will see that the ironmaster leaves invitation and how ironmaster's daughter, Edla Wilmanson, comes and she takes him home. The another part of the story we will do in video number 3. Go through the word meanings, learn. Till then, bye. Stay safe, stay healthy, and read the chapter.